especially. Well, Peter, you might be the first person on this planet that has ever shut me up for this long. Good old Heraclitus, I tell you, that wild and crazy guy.
If I came to you and I gave you $10,000 for 20% of the company.
Deal.
Yeah.
So, is that a verbal?
Younger than us, sorry to say, Joseph.
What, younger than 20?
Joe, we're just trying to help you because clearly you've lost control of the conversation.
I never, you know what, with all due respect, I never had control of the situation. Doesn't mean I'm overgone. What doesn't kill me makes you stronger.
Look at you! You are insane!
How did I do that?
You're insane! You're insane!
It's Late Nite Jaffe. Late Nite Jaffe, how are you guys doing? Do you have your gin martini tonight? Anna Bowman has her gin martini and she's excited for the show. Guess what? Without trying to spill this, so do I. Cheers. Didn't spill it yet, but my stretch goal today is to spill the gin martini on the Roadcaster, fry this entire studio. Why not? It's exactly what we do here. Glenn, happy birthday. You said you can't join us. You're in New Orleans for your birthday. Well, I didn't know it was your birthday. Happy birthday, my friend. We will miss you, but glad that you are having fun. Don't do anything I wouldn't do. Wait, do exactly what I would. You know what I mean. Have some beignets. I was in New Orleans just before everything went crazy, and I loved it. I'll go back again one day. Today is International Moment of Laughter Day. So maybe you don't need a moment. Maybe you're just living, loving, and laughing all the time. I think that is the goal. And it's an international day, which means we're all doing it together. So hope you are having a day filled with laughter and happiness and optimism and hope, because this is what we do here. As simple as that. This is what I'm going to do tonight with Paul Epstein. It's not Epstein, it's Epstein. Young Frankenstein. You know what I mean? It's Paul Epstein. He's a former NFL and NBA business executive, leadership and culture expert, best-selling author, keynote speaker. And if you just look at his face, you can tell that he's an awesome guy. It's just pretty damn obvious. And I cannot wait for him to join the show in just a short while. What an amazing week it's been. Robin DeAngelo, Michael Casson, Paul Epstein, Bryce Hoffman tomorrow. My cup, my martini glass runneth over with incredible people, with incredible stories and incredible insights. You know what else is incredible? The Jaffy coin is incredible. I have often said this to brands, to marketers, to executives. The 2 A's, assets and access. And that's what the cryptocurrency does. That's what the Jaffy coin does. It gives Jaffy holders, regulars, previous guests, access to me, to other guests, to our community, but also there are assets. And in this case, the ability for 10 Jaffy coin to get a supersized shout out, or even to come on the show and ask a question, just like former guest Cyrus Crone did yesterday, where he got his supersized shout out by punting and promoting his wonderful book, Bombarded. So I love this. I love this experimentation. I want to wish happy birthday to fellow Spurs fan Neil Phillips, Joanne Bard, David Rogers, and on LinkedIn, Mr. Brian Wong. I think he's still 19 years old and he's probably on company number 7. Chelsea Mardy, Jewel Touch, and Veronica Sonsev. Hope you guys had an amazing day today. Well, now it's time for our seated soliloquy. And the seated soliloquy, I hope you don't take offense to my seated soliloquy. I'm sorry. That was a little bit punny. But this one, very appropriately, is called Offense. My guest today is like a red bow, insofar that I feel he connects so many of the dots from previous episodes that weave together amazing insights associated with movement, momentum, adversity, resilience, tenacity, agility. I could go on. And then he brings them all together with everyone's favorite analogy, sport. We're talking about the idea of winning, or at least playing to win, versus not to lose. Cue Joe's casino analogy right about now. When I play not to lose, I'm activating the self-preservation side of my survival instinct. But until I switch to playing to win, I won't unlock the adaptation phase. And it is only through adaptation that change, evolution, or transformation can occur. Paul is more succinct. He just calls it playing offense and boils it down to a very simple action item, playing with purpose. Why I love this so much is that it takes this flowery and often ambiguous concept, purpose, that flirts with becoming another square on the corporate bullshit bingo board, and provides both a really strong foundation to anchor it and a North Star to guide it. Purpose is not and should not be thought of as passive, static, defensive. It is quite the opposite. It is active, dynamic, offensive. Offense. It is a call to action, a rallying cry that very clearly draws a line in the sand. Winning means putting more points on the board than your competitor. Yes, it also means conceding less points than your opponent. But this is not a chicken and egg endless riddle. Scoring points comes first. Conceding less comes second. So all you have to do is define what points on the board means for you and your business, as well as what might constitute a flag on the play, or in my wheelhouse, a yellow card. And then just make sure that you prioritize the former over the latter. Call it experimentation, innovation, disruption, risk-taking. Call it anything you like, as long as you call it offense. Think about it. Are you playing with purpose? Are you playing offense or defense? Are you looking to live to fight another day? Or is your sole reason for being to win the day? And then the day after that, and then the day after that, and then the day after that. Well, I must say I was very inspired by Paul, by this whole topic of front foot. We're about to talk about it. But first, let me give you a little bit of background on my guest tonight. There couldn't be a bigger believer in purpose than Paul Epstein. Over a 15-year run as a professional sports executive, he learned how purpose can be the igniter of high performance. Backed by his track record of achieving success and significance, Paul steered business teams that executed billion-dollar NFL campaigns, broke Super Bowl revenue records, generated league-leading sales results for cellar-dwelling NBA clubs. Paul's proudest moment was when he was internally known as the why coach at the San Francisco 49ers, coaching others to find their why and act on it. Paul has now curated the most actionable takeaways into a leader's playbook of how he and his teams produce this impact in these hyper-competitive environments. He calls it playing offense. Now, please watch this.
We live in a working world that has never been faster, more complex, or more disruptive. Competitive threats around every corner. There's a fight for finite resources, rising consumer standards, shifting expectations, all while the wars for talent are becoming more fierce and more intense than we've ever seen. The truth is, if we want to achieve these external transformations in the marketplace and lead the workforce of tomorrow, it's an inside game. We can create an unstoppable wave of momentum as we lock arms and do this together to spark inspiration in everybody that we touch. Ladies and gentlemen, now is our time. Meet me at the 50 and let's go play some offense. Thank you.
I'm not going to lie. I got goosebumps.
Me too, Joseph.
But you got goosebumps because you're like, that seated soliloquy. When is it going to end?
No, it fires me up even watching that, and of course in the state that we're in now, and just coming out of this pandemic and still fighting through it. But to me, playing offense, it meant a ton pre-pandemic, and it means even more now, given what we've recently been through.
Well, someone who's here to support you is Isabel Bircher. Isabel said here to support Paul getting a drink now. Can't wait.
Isabel, cheers. Cheers to that.
I'm going to do it as well. What are you drinking tonight?
This is Tuscany's finest. So our honeymoon, we spent a good chunk of time there, my wife Myra and I. And yes, from David Poppy himself, this is from the private cellar. So cheers.
Well, we have more dirt on you coming from Isabel. Isabel says he's awesome, known him most of his life, so proud of him. And Larry Bircher says amazingly bright man and inspiring personality. So the fans are out. The fans are out.
And they happen to have the same last name, so I love it. Maybe they even know each other. This Isabel and Larry. This is fantastic.
Well, Anna Bowman says chin chin. So there you go.
Yes.
We have a lot to talk about. And first of all, let's acknowledge that you are guest number 236 in this little journey, this little adventure of mine, but by far the best guest. There's no doubt.
Come on, 10 seconds in, we're rocking and rolling.
I mean, for some reason, by the way, every single show, it's the best show I've ever done. I don't know how it happens. But...
All right, I'm going to watch tomorrow, my friend, and I'm going to see how you intro that, but game on.
Let's hope Bryce Hoffman is not watching tonight, because I'm prepared to say right now this show is even going to be better than tomorrow. I'm just kidding, Bryce. But we have a lot to talk about, and we're going to start off. Let me find a nice background for you. Let's go with, we've got so many to choose from. We're going to go with this for now. But you're going to see a lot of wonderful sporting analogies. Before we get into the meat and the potatoes, it is important to let you know that we sent our private investigators into the field to find out some fun and embarrassing facts about you. We want to know the man behind the man. We want to know what makes you tick. And this is what we found. First of all, very interestingly, amazingly, I wish that I actually got a real photograph. But you went to Vegas. You met your wife in Vegas. True love happens in Vegas. And thank goodness what happens in Vegas didn't stay in Vegas, because you guys left together. Tell us about that story.
Well, first of all, I'll zoom out for a second, because when you meet somebody that turns out to be the love of your life in a place like Las Vegas, and we both showed up as two single crazy kids and then left holding hands and in love, I thought I was the only one. And then at the time, I'm still working at the 49ers, which by brand and scope seems like a ginormous organization. But in actuality, there's about 300 full-time employees, just to give everybody perspective. So I'm talking to folks, sharing this story at the Niners about, hey, I just met this amazing woman and da-da-da-da, thinking it was a once-in-a-lifetime story. And then lo and behold, Joseph, 2 other guys came out of the woodwork and said, I met my wife in Vegas too. So in a smaller organization, think about that. 3 of us met the one in Sin City in Las Vegas. And yeah, I have to spare all the details. Otherwise, she's a couple rooms away. She would just damage me if I shared a lot of the details. But let's just say there were pool parties. There were adult beverages. It was table service, DJs, and I've got to stop there.
And I'm glad that you stopped just before I asked the question, feathers or no feathers?
No.
No feathers. Well, I will tell you, interesting story. When I was training for the New York Marathon, I had to get my miles on the road. I was in Vegas giving a keynote, and the only way to go for a run, August, September time, is pretty much at 4 a.m. You can't even think about doing it once the sun has risen. When you go running at about 4:30 in the morning along the strip towards the airport, you see 3 groups. The first, and it's actually there is the sublime and the ridiculous. First of all, you see people that haven't gone home yet, that are drunk out of their minds, that are literally falling downstairs. I saw those people.
Yeah.
Then you actually see people that are coming home from work. And I saw 2 dancers coming home with all the feathers and the plumes, the flamingo dancers. And I actually have a photo with 2, wonderful women that I struck up a little conversation with at about 5:15 in the morning. And then the third group are just people cleaning, and you actually understand what's going on, and you see all the street cleaning. And it was like, just from a study of people standpoint, one of the most fascinating, moments where I went on this run, but I feel like it was in education. And I never met my wife that day, but that's okay. She was back in
not even the gal, the flamingo feathers at 5:15. That didn't turn out to be the one, is what I'm hearing.
I know I was wearing the feathers. I'm just saying.
Oh, all right. Well, there you go.
All right. So now that was an easy one for you. Here is now we're going deep undercover. Apparently, a man with a last name of Epstein is not going to lie. He is a bit of a lover of bacon. And when you're not in the boardroom, when you're not in the box, you're actually in the stands cheering in your bacon outfit. So can you believe we actually found this photo from your past?
I cannot believe it, but that is damn cool. I am framing this. This is amazing.
So you just, how much do you love bacon?
Obsessed. I literally, a quick backstory. So at a very young age, where I'm at LA born, Angelino, about 3 hours north of the border in Mexico. My mom, proud Mexican descent. We have family just south of the border. So about a 4-hour drive south of LA. Spent a lot of weekends there when I was a kid, all my holidays there when I was a kid. So 4th Christmas, I got a box which was shaking, and I saw a little black nose coming out of it, a wet nose. Turned out to be a puppy. So at a very young age, I learned that you get animals as gifts, and turned out to be just so precious, my little Cocker Spaniel back then. And so for the next Christmas, my family asked me, what do I want? And because of said obsession with bacon, I said, a pig. And after a very weird look by countless individuals, I never got the pig, but that is how much I love bacon, that I just kind of wanted pigs all around. And so I think this conversation is getting a little weird, Joseph. So I don't know, maybe you want to pivot, or maybe you want to stay on bacon. Up to you.
Listen, the funny thing is, the very thing that I hoped wouldn't happen is starting to happen. Just the talk of pigs and bacon is making my dog, who I allowed in the virtual studio, on provision that he actually kept quiet, he's starting to growl. Anna Bowman says pigs are my favorite, and Robert Collins says bacon rules.
Yes,
and they're highly socialized.
You,
well, I listen. I'm just glad you didn't get the pig, because you would have, turned it into bacon. So
yeah, let's not even go there. But at the end of the day, as a 5-year-old, I just thought it made sense.
All right, Paul. Well, now you have earned your Spurs, not your San Antonio Spurs, but you've earned your Spurs. We found out a little bit about you, but I would actually like to talk a little bit about your background, because
sure,
you're. I mean, how lucky are you? Not only have you worked within the NBA and the NFL. I mean, my son, I'm going to make sure he doesn't. He's actually going to University of Miami studying sports management. He can't watch this episode because I don't want him to believe that dreams can come true. This is like going to Disneyland. Like, who doesn't want to work, sports lover, for the NFL or the NBA? But not only did you work for these organizations, but you actually pivoted from within the organization. You actually found your why and your calling, so much so that the organization started to call you Coach Y. I would love to hear that story. It just sounds, just too magnificent.
Sure. Yeah. So when I was at the Niners, my role being head of sales and business development, this goes back close to a handful of years now. And we had a leadership offsite retreat that, bottom line, is just changed my life. It was 2 days that were focused on finding our personal why. So the entire executive leadership team, what is your why? What is your North Star? What is your personal mission? And I drank the Kool-Aid real hard because literally on the drive home, I knew that something changed significantly in my life. I didn't know what the future would hold, but I knew that life was going to be real different because I tapped into this sense of purpose that I never felt before. And so fast forward literally days and weeks and months, and everybody thinks about finding your purpose like there's a moment and then you snap into something. In my case, it was a little bit more of a methodical process, but I started to feel tension. I felt tension because while I loved the industry, I loved the organization, I loved our culture, I loved the leadership. So I loved the big picture. I wasn't in love with the day-to-day activities that were a part of my job. What once inspired me 4, 5, 10 years before, it no longer got me out of bed, but I didn't sense that tension until I put words to my purpose. I had a formal why statement. I had these core values that were a byproduct of this offsite retreat. And then when I started to apply them and make really big life decisions through that lens of purpose and values, that's when the game changed for me. And so needless to say, if you fast forward months later after I'm describing, I almost felt selfish if I would have kept this gift to myself because I knew that my life had changed because of purpose after I started to kind of understand what makes me feel alive. So that's probably the best analogy to describe. I always loved my life, but when I found my purpose, I now felt alive. And that's a very important distinction because one is in each and every moment versus one is solely macro big picture. So basically, once I tapped into my personal purpose, other folks in the organization could see that I was lighting up in a very different way. I had a different sense of energy. And a couple folks pulled me to the side and said, hey, basically what's gotten into you? Like what punch did you drink? And if so, I'd like some, right? It was kind of that type of human connection that they saw. And I just said, hey, you know what? I think it'd be kind of cool if you want to go through the same process. I'm not an expert at it, but why don't we just spend 2-3 hours on the side and I'll take you through the same process that I went through. And one person did it, 2 person did it, 5 did it, 10 did it. And the water cooler buzz started to spread, even to the point HR caught wind of it. And that's kind of where it spread like wildfire, where they said, hey, Paul, as a part of the onboarding process for the organization, when we're presenting ourselves to recruits, whether on the business side, the football side, all being one organization, can you coach others to find their why? And that's when it was solely a passion project. So just full disclosure, I still had my day job. I'm still head of sales, business development, and charged with revenue for this NFL club. And we were doing really well. But every single free moment in my life became about being a coach of purpose because I had to pay that gift of purpose forward. And that's really the backstory. And then, the grand finale is I fell more in love with my passion project than my day job after doing it for nearly a year on the side. I even started a department that was founded on the principles of people, purpose, performance. And once I did all that, I couldn't turn away from it. It became a healthy obsession. And that's what led to my eventual Jerry Maguire moment, my leap of faith from sports. I'll stop there. Please feel free to hop in. But that is the backstory of how I became the why coach. And that why essentially propelled me to now found my own organization, which is called, no shocker here, Purpose Labs. We help people, teams, organizations find their purpose. Go for it, Joseph. But that is the backstory.
Love it. You know what? I've got emails to check. I don't need to talk. I just need to listen to you, because the energy, that's the word. Yeah. There's energy. You can feel it. You can sense it. You can almost touch it. Robert says, Paul brings it ever forward by asking the eternal question, why? What drives the individual people? What are their unique purpose that drives the team? So there are two things that, well, first of all, I got to tell you, I don't think I've ever heard, I can't remember a story of where someone essentially pivoted from within. Generally what happens is they're kicked to the curb, they're let go, or they're fired. Like there's the midlife crisis, or as I'm learning, what I call a midlife awakening. Like Daniel Gutierrez, who was on the show. He was in LA. He just literally burnt all his certificates and awards and moved to Peru and runs retreats for executives now on mindfulness. And he's the happiest guy I've ever met until I met you. So I love that. And I have to say, it also speaks to the organization and HR that they were able not only to witness this, but allow it to flourish. And probably they recognized at the time that it would be inevitable that you would leave at some point. But the other thing I just want to pick up on is this idea of tension. I've never heard of, and I'll tell you exactly why I love it. Because the aha, the epiphany, the moment, the awakening, that's the pull. That's the moth to a flame. But there's also a push, and I'd never heard the pushing off against the status quo, against the incumbent or incumbency thinking. And that was the restlessness. That almost is the precursor to the why. I'll bet you even Simon Sinek doesn't talk about tension, or maybe that does come from him. But I love that.
Yeah, no, I've heard others. I won't take credit for this, but I've heard.
I'm giving you credit. Damn it.
Well, no, thank you. I've heard prior to me understanding to the depths that I do now what purpose is and how you can activate it in your life. I always heard that purpose comes from pain. Like in some cases, it comes from inspiration. I think it's a balance of both, to be honest. But purpose does come from pain. And I'll share a quick story that I think would be important context, because I think it's applicable to everybody listening in now. All the credit to my executive coach. She was a part of my University of Michigan executive MBA program. Her name is Sue-Ann. I've shared the story countless times and love her to death. Sue-Ann was absolutely a game and life changer for me. Our first conversation when I'm in that role with the 49ers, we sit down and she says, Paul, I know what you do. Tell me, what do you love about it? What do you hate about it? And what's in the middle? And I answered all three. And then Sue-Ann says, go deeper on that love bucket. I said, all right. I love being a coach just like you. I love the people side of business. I love the culture side of business. I love molding and growing and developing talent. I love believing in people so much that they exceed any level of performance or potential they even thought was possible. And she just started to light up and she said, awesome. Now on a good day, what percentage of your time do you do that? And that's when I started to sink in my chair, because I knew that I wouldn't love the answer. Again, I loved the big picture of what I was a part of, but I didn't love the day-to-day activities. And so because of that, I was just dead honest with her. And I said, look, it's probably about 10 to 20%. And she said, okay, if you become your boss, does that number go up, down, or sideways? And in my head, I was thinking, I knew what my boss did, more strategy, less people. So the number would go down. So basically, I only feel alive for 20% of my day. And the higher up, the totem pole, the flagpole, the corporate ladder that I go, I'm only going to go down in my feeling of being alive. And that became a walk away for me. Before finding my purpose, I would have never been able to kind of grasp this concept of, because we're all chasing success. We're all on this ladder. We all want the trophies and the achievement. And that's what I wanted solely. But then I shifted from success to significance. And that was an important part for me. And that's something that I think everybody should be asking themselves. Not only what industry do you work in, what company do you work for? If you truly love people, then who you work for and why you do what you do is more important than anything else. And once I really tapped into that, it just became a non-negotiable. I had to take a leap of faith in order to get in touch further with my purpose and values.
I would stand up and give you an ovation right now, but I would probably knock over my mic, knock over the martini, and pull this earpiece out my ear. So I'm not going to do that. But again, you've taken convention and flipped it on its head, right? Which is purpose comes from pain. Now, let's just look at the basic sporting analogy, right? No pain, no gain. And it's interesting how it all comes full circle. By the way, I have to just take a moment. Stephen Rubin, who's one of our regulars, just came home from a celebration dinner for Tony's birthday. Happy birthday, Tony! I had no idea.
Happy birthday.
We are happy, and I've got to say, my second new favorite person after you, Paul, has got to be Robert, because he said this show is my primary go-to Clubhouse. A nice little play. And in fact, you know what? We're going to do a little after show in Clubhouse tonight as part of the Likeable Business Club. Thanks to Dave Kirpin as well. Michael Trout is here, and he said, hello, Paul. So just a little bit of a break to just, and Joseph, thanks. I assume I assume so. So I love that whole, background and context setter. Here you are now, and you've written this incredible book called The Power of Playing Offense, a leader's playbook for personal and team transformation. Now, there's so much I want to talk about with this book, and we're going to talk a lot about it, and also talk about the writing and the thought leadership associated with this. But the first thing that just struck me very interestingly, I looked at who wrote the foreword. Yeah. And I was like, wait a second. Surely Joe Montana would be writing the foreword, or some, San Francisco 49ers great. But you've turned to the founder of Zoom, Eric Yuan, and I wanted to know why.
Well, it's a great question. And I consider myself, using a sports term, a dual threat. As great as I am proud of not only the people I've surrounded myself with, but the things that we've accomplished together on the business side. Of course, my passion is sports. So I'm equal parts sports and business and leadership. And so that's how I attack each day. The relationship with Zoom happened in the consulting work that I do. I stepped in expecting it to be another client, another engagement. And just like any other consulting space, there are some phenomenal clients. There's some painful. There's a lot in between. I will say this super openly, and this is what sparked the relationship, not only with Eric, but his whole leadership team. Zoom, before the world knew who Zoom was, because this is pre-pandemic by years, folks. I know we're all on it now, practically daily. At this time, they're an up-and-coming technology company that's kind of emerging from this very crowded space in Silicon Valley. Zoom is undeniably the best culture I have ever worked with in my life. Wow. Like, bar none. I felt something special getting out of the elevator. It almost felt too good to be true. They have this mantra of delivering happiness. I'm like, okay, corporate words on the wall. No, 100% true. They are better behind closed doors than they are out in front. And I just shared that because I fell in love with working with Zoom and their leaders and helping them, really, I could say this humbly, take an A culture to maybe be an A plus. I mean, they already had an A culture when I came in. And really, that was what sparked it. I just said, if I'm going to have somebody be a partner in bringing this message of playing offense to the world, it needs to be authentic. It needs to be empowering. It needs to be somebody that is aligned with my values. And Eric and Zoom, like game changers. They just do it right. So would it be safe to say that Zoom is a company and a brand that plays offense? 1,000,000%. Like, yes, delivering happiness. They proactively deliver their mission every day. Every single decision they make, every action, every behavior is made through that lens. And that is playing with purpose. That is playing offense. Now, I want to ask you for a different example. Yeah. This may be a tougher one, which is to ask you a company that plays defense. Hold on. I'll ask it two ways. Is there an example of a company that plays defense and wins? Not sustainable. No. Sports analogy. Defense may win you a game. It will not win you a season. It will not win you a championship. You will never form a dynasty. Can you win today, this week, this month, this quarter in a public company that just chases a bottom line at the expense of people and other things? Sure. Are you going to win in the long game with that strategy? Fundamentally, no. And to answer your question, yes. The companies that play defense are no longer around, because the way that I will explain it should hopefully resonate. Have you ever heard, and this is for Joseph and for everybody listening in, have you ever heard of the statement when you're presenting a new idea because you genuinely feel that it can level up the performance or the output of whatever it is you're doing, and you get pushback and somebody says, we can't do that because we've always done it this way. That's the way we've always done it before in our organization. We've all heard that, and it's super frustrating because you're trying to bring your best ideas and they just get shut down without even an effort or an open mind. Those companies play defense. You want to know some of those companies? I can think of a lot of big box retailers that don't exist anymore. I can think of, so we all probably have been watching a lot of Netflix in the past year. Why? Because we've been home largely in a pandemic. Remember you used to go to a video store? And remember, I think their colors were blue and yellow, and it was kind of a fun experience. That company doesn't exist anymore. You know why? Because when Netflix was a little itty bitty company, Blockbuster didn't innovate. They didn't adapt to the times. They were stuck in a business model. And that would be, I'm not picking on Blockbuster, but literally you can say what companies are extinct that didn't have to become extinct. And it's because they were stuck in a defensive mindset.
Well, listen, I certainly don't ever plug anyone else's book, but I happen to know someone who wrote this book called Built to Suck. And if you just look at where this finger is, there's a little logo that might be the same company that you just mentioned. And by the way, interestingly enough, and you know this to be true, Blockbuster actually had an opportunity to buy Netflix.
Yes.
And they turned them down. And I suppose, to use the sporting analogy, they weren't able to transition from defense to offense.
Yeah. And, you know, I think this is, I don't want to just rail on a company or knock an individual or even an organization. I think it's hard sometimes to pivot when you're so not only set in defense, but in full transparency, you're successful. Blockbuster was a financially successful company, but then the world is changing around you. So now you need to kind of pivot, and it's hard to change when you're feeling success. And I think that's a good moral of the story for all of us, is just because you're winning today doesn't mean that it's going to be a winning strategy forever.
I mean, it's entirely true. And then going back, by the way, to Netflix as well. I mean, I feel like this is great. This is like we're playing tennis now. Netflix, when they shipped their billionth DVD, they shut it down. So they did exactly what you're saying companies should do, and that so many companies don't do, which is, with the success, they said, right, that was fun, you know, pop the champagne, it's time to move on. It's time to be able to move forward. And I suppose they moved from, you know, I mean, they didn't move from defense to offense, but I want to ask you that question next, which is, can you give me an example of a company that has successfully transitioned and moved from defense to offense? And I imagine, you know, those are the companies that hire you because they're stuck in defense, right? They're against the ropes. They're taking the punches. They've got to be able to now fight their way back into contention, and maybe their opponent into the other corner.
Yeah, I think
I'm just mixing sporting analogies.
No. This is fantastic. I love the conversation. So I think where I can probably add the most value to everybody listening in, could I articulate one company that has gone from defense to offense? Sure. But I think I'd like to make it more universal and say, what are the tactics that if your company plays defense, how can you then transform into playing offense? And it's something that I've seen work universally across all industries. So I just want to share this because it comes from a place where I used to mismanage this situation. So when I come in, people often call me the people doctor or the people problem doctor, if you will. Like, I'm a culture consultant. So I come in situations where sometimes they're a little toxic. Sometimes leadership, there's an opportunity to develop. But bottom line, it's not an A+ culture. They want to become an A+ culture. What I used to do, and this is a mistake, so I'm just going to be vulnerable and share this. I used to think that you need to change the bad and focus on those that are doing bad into doing good. So here's a good analogy for everybody. There's 3 groups of people, and I'll provide a fun metaphor for this, and I use this in my consulting work. There's partners, there's tourists, and there's prisoners. Okay? Partners, tourists, prisoners. Every organization has them. The best have them, the worst have them. They're there. 3 groups. Partners metaphorically are, if I'm doing a workshop, they're in the front row, they're engaged, they're leaning in. They don't need to agree with everything, but they are switched on. They are the folks that if you're trying to flip a culture, start there. But I wasn't. The tourists, some go left, some go right. There's a fork in the road. If it goes well, they're glad they came. If it goes wrong, they blame you, the tour guide, AKA me. The last group, prisoners, back row, 5:30, can't get here soon enough. Arms are folded. I was voluntold to be here. That's the prisoner. I used to come in as a culture consultant and think that the answer was change the prisoners, flip the prisoner's mindset. That's how you take a bad culture and make it good. Defense and make it offense. Totally wrong. it didn't work. B, it drained my energy so that now I had no more energy to pour into the first two groups, the partners and the tourists. I now have seen the light after, again, misaligning my strategy for a while. And I now shine a light on the bright spots that are the partners. And what it does, it naturally and organically attracts some of the tourists to join the partners. So if you're trying to transform a culture from defense to offense, find those bright spots. And the way to scale them is to give recognition and reward the behaviors and them modeling the values that you want to see. And then the people in the middle join them. And all of a sudden the minority becomes the majority. That's the way that you can shift from defense to offense.
It's a brilliant, brilliant point, and it applies equally well and appropriately to customer service, which is
yes,
or even social media monitoring, which is we always fixate on the critics and on the complaints and try and convert the unconverted or those that cannot be converted, and we neglect our fans, we neglect our advocates, we neglect our loyalists, and we almost take them for granted and take advantage of them by doing that. And I think what you're saying is the ability to celebrate those victories is what will propel you. What do they say? Success begets success.
yes.
As opposed to fixating. I don't know if you know. I'm sure you've probably come across him in similar circles. Ross Bernstein, as opposed to Bernstein. But Ross was on the show, and he also spoke about this amazing analogy of a coach that he just has always admired. And this coach, instead of beating up the team when they lost, he would beat up the team when they won. I mean, again, he did something different. He made him like do extra laps and extra ice work in ice hockey when they won, because he wanted to propel them. But it was a different kind of love, right? But the point is, the convention is to to focus on the negative. What he did was he focused on the positive. He said, you won today, you want to win tomorrow? That's how you do it, by training even harder, by working even harder, by being even tougher.
100%. And I think even if you zoom out and look at some of the societal issues that we have right now, and you hear these buzzwords such as diversity and inclusion, and if you could boil it down, it's, does everybody feel like they matter? And does everybody feel like they have a seat at the table? And one of the pillars, not only from the book, but just in the spirit of playing offense, I call it salute the long snapper. And it addresses exactly what you just talked about. The long snapper, you don't have to be a sports fan to get the analogy. It's the role player. It's the last person in the locker room, the player and the person that if they were to do 99 things right, they never hear a word, but they do one thing wrong and they never hear the end of it. If that is the environment that we create, the long snapper feels small, they're belittled, they don't feel valued, they never give you any discretionary effort. They do just enough to hold on to their jobs or just enough to get by. And therefore, you put a ceiling on your performance, on your productivity, on your profits if you're a business. The reason I bring all this up, the way to create a more inclusive environment, similar to scaling those bright spots, shine a light and recognize those long snappers, because there's way more long snappers in the world than star quarterbacks. So until they feel valued, seen, heard, like they matter and they have a genuine seat at the table, they're never going to give their best. So we want high performance, but we only shine a light on the quarterback. And so my message is every person equally matters in the locker room. Don't just focus on statistics, focus on what role they can serve in the greater team. And I think that's a differentiator as we go forward.
Now that is one pillar. By the way, do you like the fact that I was ready for you? I was lying in wait.
Look at that.
So
the 5 pillars.
You wrote this amazing article and you spoke about these 5 pillars of playing offense. And I will post a link to that. I'm also going to post in a moment a link to your book on Amazon that people can buy. Let's talk a little bit about the other pillars, because you've mentioned salute the long snapper. But the first one is this idea of living with championship purpose. What does that mean?
Purpose, similar to becoming the why coach. This is, does every person believe in why they do what they do? Do they feel they're a part of something bigger than themselves? Do they feel that they make a greater contribution? Do they feel that they have an opportunity to drive impact and make a genuine difference every day? Because if they don't, it's paycheck driven. So this pillar is, how do you transform what largely is a paycheck driven society into a purpose driven society? And because they have a deeper meaning in what they do every single day, because it's driven by the why.
So next is this idea of being the storm chaser.
Yeah, this is defense, right? So if purpose gets you inspired and takes that first step in the blue skies, inevitably, think of 2020. 2020 was the biggest storm that many of us have seen, literally and figuratively. And if that's the case, some people retreat, they step back, they hide, versus others say, okay, the environment around me has changed. I acknowledge that adversity is inevitable. I promise you, if you live a long enough life, there's going to be waves of adversity, personal and professional. Those are the storms. So do you choose to chase them? Do you choose to pivot, reinvent, take an intentional 1 step back to take 10 forward? That's taking an offensive mindset into chasing the storm. And the end result is, how do you transform adversity into achievement? And I would argue there's 2 or 3 major pieces here. You have to cultivate grit. You have to get in touch with your resilience by how you pick yourself up off the mat when adversity strikes. And then how do you have the courage to battle through the storms? Here's the beauty of it, Joseph. The second pillar ties to the first, and here's how. If the first is about purpose, purpose is the fuel of resilience. Purpose is the fuel of courage. And I'll close with this thought. And this is an anchor point, not only of the book, but just in how I think about life. Purpose keeps you on the treadmill, especially on the days you want to get off. I'll repeat that. Purpose keeps you on the treadmill, especially on the days you want to get off. Because there's a million days that we don't feel like doing something, but when we believe in it, we fight through and we battle because there's purpose. If I don't believe in it, I just hop off the treadmill.
All right, I'm ready to chase that storm and go into the eye of the storm. And if I do that, maybe I won't win the green jacket, but I'll get the gold jacket. So what does it mean to embody gold jacket culture?
Yeah, so gold jacket is what they give an NFL Hall of Famer. Basically, we're looking for people that want to do special things. It's not good enough to just have table stakes and say, I want to be a contributor. This is about people that want to be the best at what they do. They want to have a winning mentality each and every day. And so my positioning is, culture is the competitive advantage that nobody else can replicate. I can copy your technology. I can copy your process. I can copy your system. I can disrupt any innovation that you have. I cannot disrupt your people if you have a gold jacket culture. That is the tribal mentality that separates defense from offense. And so gone are the days of culture being command and control. In are the days of culture being camaraderie and connection. And that's what this pillar is about.
Love it. And then finally, last but not least, leave it better than you found it. I mean, okay, so like without even you responding to that, I mean, this is an analogy for life. This is an analogy for being a president. This is an analogy for any period of time where you basically want to say, even the concept of our planet, right? It's this idea of knowing that the time we spent was not wasted. We were not oxygen invaders, as the old saying goes. How do you interpret this idea of leave it better than you found it as part of this idea of playing offense?
Yeah, every person in every place should be better when you walk away than when they met you. Bottom line, when I walk in a room, I want it to feel different in a good way. When I leave the room, people should feel like there's a presence there because you were contribution and impact focused. Here's a simple way of thinking about it. This pillar is about going from a life of self to a life of legacy. It's about, if the first mountain of life, I mentioned this earlier, is solely about success, I believe that the second mountain is about yes to success and to significance. Because success is serving yourself, significance is serving others. And here's the beauty of it. We're all, myself in a former life included in this statement, we're all so obsessed with success. Guilty. But what we're really after is significance. And here's my argument. I know tons of people that are successful. Their trophy wall is full, but they don't feel alive. They're not fulfilled. As Tony Robbins said, success without fulfillment is failure. Okay? If that's the case, I know a ton of successful people that don't feel significance, but I don't know a single person that feels significance and isn't successful. It's interesting how when we become others focused, we tend to also bring the best out of ourselves. And that's the message of the fifth pillar.
I mean, it's a very, very powerful one. And it comes down to something that I even heard so many people, Lodro Rinslow on the show, Tom Peters on the show, talking about this idea of resume qualities versus eulogy qualities.
I like that.
Yeah, I mean, it really is important when we think about this idea of success, not or, but and significance, and them working together. I want to make sure that we just touch on one more point, which I absolutely loved. And I have a quote for you, but first I'm going to quote you. Before we lead others, we must first lead ourselves. Again, I'll go back to Tom Peters, who said a leader's job is not to create followers, it's to create more leaders. So I would love for you to talk about the significance of what I would call democratizing leadership, because in a company that plays offense, it is very much, I would assume, about even more so than normal, about we versus me, about team, as opposed to the star quarterback.
Yeah, this starts with, I have a very strong belief that the world largely misdefines what leadership is, because we as a world think of leadership as a rank, a role, a title, or an authority figure. And if that's the case, and we look at a pyramid structure or a hierarchy, I know the stats on this. For every 10 employees, there's one positional leader. So do you mean to tell me that less than 10% of the planet Earth deserves to be called a leader, deserves to feel the responsibility of leadership, the privilege of leadership? And I call BS on that, because I know that if you want to empower a society, an organization, a culture, if you want to empower a team, if you want to empower yourself, leadership is one of the most powerful things that you can do. So here's my piece around, before you lead others, you must first lead yourself. I'll pull the audience in on this one. Think of the greatest leader that you've ever had. Any walk of life. It could be professional. It could be a coach. It could be a teacher. It could be a parent. Any walk of life, personal or professional. What did they do for you to think of them right now? What were their actions? What were their behaviors? How did they show up? And that, to me, is what leadership is. You thought of that person for a reason. And so now the challenge is it because they effectively led you, or did they effectively lead themselves, which inspired you, to use some of your quote, not only to follow you, but to want to step into leadership on your own? Because the key here is, if I were to ask a group in 5 years to think of the greatest leader that they've ever had, do you want to be thought of as the answer to that question? And if so, step into the behaviors of the leader that inspires you the most and model those behaviors every day. And bottom line, Joseph, the premise of the book is this: before you lead others, you must first lead yourself. And guess why? Because going back to the pain, this is the playbook that I never had. Nobody gave me a playbook on how to lead myself. I was told how to manage others. I was never told how to lead others, nevertheless lead myself. And what I realized is when we achieve the best results, when we achieve the best relationships, when we achieve the best outcomes, when I was driving with purpose, essentially when I was playing offense, it's because I was leading myself. And so I wanted to write a playbook that I never had and pay this gift forward for others so that they could avoid the pitfalls that I went through and also step into some of those bright spots that I was able to achieve.
If I was to ask the question, who leads leaders? The answer to the question is they lead themselves. And it would be nice to be able to say, well, they draw their inspiration from others who came before them. Yes. And they have mentors. Yes. And they lead themselves. When you are out in front, it is lonely. It's tough at the top, as they say.
Yes.
But, if you are that star quarterback where or the long snapper.
Both.
Exactly. Whether you are either of those actors in this elaborate tapestry, in this ultimate expression of reality sports TV, you've got the coaches on the sidelines, you've got the trainers, but in that moment, the real leadership has to come from within. And I think you've said that beautifully.
It's all about ownership. And just imagine this for everybody listening right now. Imagine a world where everybody took pride and ownership in leading themselves. They genuinely woke up each day wanting to be the best possible version of themselves, not through thought, but through action, and actions that inspire others. If that's the world that we live in, I know that that'll be not only a better working world, but just a better society as a whole. And that's really what inspired me to write the book. I just wanted everybody to step into each day, first to transform themselves so that they could then transform others. And lastly, then we transform the future. And that's where leaders create leaders, as you said, Joseph.
And I want to just add one more point to that, which is when you're playing defense, you're blaming others. When you're playing offense, you take responsibility. And I think that becomes so crystal clear now, that when you realize that the buck stops with you, that must be the ultimate liberating, motivating, empowering act, when you realize the power that you have and that power comes from within.
Amen.
So Jessica Valdez says inspiring, and I'm glad that you're here, Jessica. I have one more quote for you. You will never ever guess who said it, so don't even try. It's a bit weird.
Okay.
But the quote itself is great. And it's a quote. I suppose it's a quote within a quote. Bobby Knight. So I suppose it's a Bobby Knight thing. Bobby Knight told me this: there is nothing that a good defense cannot beat a better offense. In other words, a good offense wins. So do you know who said that?
It's not Bobby Knight?
Well, but who is the told me this, right?
I don't know. It's gosh. I'm thinking Pat Riley. I don't know. There's a couple coaches that I have in my mind, but I do not know.
The answer is Dan Quayle.
Ooh.
For all the marbles, it's Dan Quayle. No, it's just a crazy quote, but I loved it because I think it comes back to, everything we discussed, which is the importance of offense, how offense is going to win you championships. Can you hear the dog?
I do. Look, hey, you made it 59 minutes and 40 seconds, my friend. We're almost at the 1 hour mark, so timed perfectly.
He made it to the end. Adam John says, great show, super insight, Joseph, about defense, offense. Love the pillars too, Paul. You know what we're gonna do? I think sometimes you got to quit when while you're ahead, don't you think?
Yeah.
So
big fan of that.
Thank you, Anne. I appreciate it. Before we go, let me tell you, this has been Paul Epstein. You were lucky because tonight what you got was a masterclass in winning, in moving to the front foot, in playing offense. You got the passion, you got the purpose, and you got everything else that starts with a P. I want you to go out and buy The Power of Playing Offense, a leader's playbook for personal and team transformation. You've got to be ready to book Paul for your virtual or in-person keynote. You can go to paulepsteinspeaks.com. Subscribe to his podcast. He has a podcast called the Playmakers Podcast. I'm going to throw something at my dog, maybe my martini. The podcast just launched in January. It's at Playmakers Pod. You can connect with Paul on LinkedIn. You can connect with him and join us in Clubhouse right now.
Yeah.
You can follow him on Instagram, on Facebook. He's guest number 236. Paul Epstein, we had it all. We had adult beverages. We had dogs barking. We're going to Clubhouse. And most importantly, and now he leaves, of course, at the end of the show. The dog finally says, you know what? I've done my damage. I've played offense. The only other person that's left is Mr. Chuck Norris.
You are Chuck Norris approved.
There you go. Let's head on over to Clubhouse. Thank you, Paul. It was a pleasure.
All right. Thank you. See ya.
Thank you for watching the show about hope, positivity, optimism, and if there's time left over, a little bit of marketing with your host, multiple author, and global keynote speaker, Joseph Jaffy. If you like the show, tell a friend or two. Please subscribe to the show. And if you want to get inside news, previews of upcoming guests, and much more, visit josephjaffe.com/subscribe to sign up for the show's newsletter.
And despite the best ministrations of your wife, you still look ugly.